Hi, everybody. I'm Ravi Kapur. I'm joined today by Raj Gupta, who is a really legendary Indian-American businessman, founder of the Gupta Kalinsky India Institute here at Johns Hopkins University, where they're having their first inaugural India conference. Really pleased to be able to sit down with you after all these years. And he's got some famous daughters as well. We'll get into that as well. But Raj, I mean, your story is like so many Indian-American entrepreneurs of your generation. I would include my father in that group of people that came here with individual ability, did not get a whole lot of support from either the U.S. or the Indian government in terms of financial support, but they found a way through guile and talent to make something, not just of yourselves, but really build a community presence. And here we are now, 5 million Indian Americans in the United States, and obviously a much more higher profile, certainly. And your children have gone on to do amazing things, and so many other folks here in the diaspora. So, I mean, start from your story, I mean, before we get into all the stuff you're doing here with this institute, because, you know, you really are the epitome of $8 and dream.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure to talk with you. So, you know, I went to IIT Bombay. I was a boy from UP, and of course, you know, like everywhere else in the world, were considered like a little bit lower level socially, coming from UP or Bihar, as opposed to Mumbai and other places. So it was an interesting place to manage and navigate at IIT itself. But I think it was a great confidence builder, because I think two things that IIT taught me. One was to deal with very different combination of people who come from different economic and background. And the second one was incredibly smart kids. You know, when you think you're a good, smart student, but then you see people who are much smarter than you. So just trying to navigate your journey through that process was something very unique about that IIT experience for 5 years. And then, of course, you know, good number of us, almost 80–90% of our class from IIT Bombay used to end up coming to the United States. And so that became one of my passion and dream that, you know, I'm going to go to the United States as soon as I finish my undergraduate degree. And interestingly, there was a very good combination or alliance between Cornell and IIT Bombay Mechanical Engineering Department, because over time they had offered fellowship to the top 2 or 3 students in each of the graduating class to come to Cornell, and gave them a scholarship to stay there. In my case, a couple of things happened. First, they said, oh, we gave you for the fall 67 scholarship, but we overextended. So if you come now, you pay for your semester, and then you'll get the scholarship starting in spring. So that 6-month period, I was very fortunate to go back and teach at IIT. But also during that period, my parents said, you're going to America, one condition we have, you're going to get married. So I didn't really know anybody. And I said, okay, I told my mom, you know, you find the right girl for me and I'll get married. So literally I got married on 24th of January, 1968. And I landed in Ithaca, New York on January 29th of 1968.
With a bride in tow.
No, bride came 6 months later, because I had no clue what was ahead of me. So
they were concerned about what you would find in Cornell.
Exactly. That's what I don't know what the concern was, but I was a very obedient son. So that's what brought me to Cornell. But I think the whole idea, just to one more comment about Cornell, my whole idea was that I'm going to do PhD in operations research and go back and teach at IIT Bombay. That was my ambition. And of course, things unfolded in a very different way.
So from Cornell, I mean, obviously, and for those of you that aren't aware, I mean, he's just one of the most prolific business leaders we've ever seen in this country. I mean, if the goal was to go back to India, what compelled you to stay in the United States?
So what happened was, first I decided operations research was too theoretical for me, and I was an engineer, so I decided to leave after master's degree. And I was very fortunate to get 3 jobs, IBM, Burroughs, and Scott Paper. And you might say, why did I choose Scott Paper? And it was simple, because my wife was expecting her first child, and that was the warmest of the 3 locations I was offered job at. And finally, they sent a company plane to pick me up and drop me back. So those 3 were the reasons why I joined Scott Paper right after graduation. And while I was there for 2.5 years, it was a great company, great career unfolding. But my parents were still alive and they wanted me to come back to India. And so I think at the night school, I did my MBA in finance at Drexel. And then I decided after finishing that I'll join a company that has operations in India. And Rohm and Haas Specialty Chemical Company, headquartered in Philadelphia, had operations in India. I got a job in finance, and that's how I moved from there to Rohm and Haas, and the idea that I will get moved to India one of these days. But as life unfolded, number one, my wife was too passionate about staying in the U.S. She had no intentions of going back to India. And of course, my career started at Rohm and Haas in November of 71, and I just had unbelievable journey career-wise. I had lived in 3 continents, functional responsibility, global responsibility, business responsibility, and 13 jobs and 17 bosses over that 29 years before I became CEO. So it was an amazing experience. And I think what was significant about that was that the company's values aligned with mine. It was very much a merit-based system, great culture of doing the right thing. And as I said, the one opportunity unfolded after other. And I just finished my career until the company was sold to Dow Chemical for $20 billion cash in spring of 2009. So that was my professional journey.
That's an incredible run. I mean, one company.
One company, but 13 jobs, multiple bosses, different jobs, different places to live. So it was a very unique, very global experience. And I think that also then, of course, unfolded incredible opportunities for me to do other things and become director of leading companies in this country, including chair positions, going in private equity, doing some teaching. So I think that experience became invaluable in unfolding the career after retirement as well.
And were you the reason the company sold at that time? You thought you were getting your peak value for the company?
No, that was not the reason. Actually, we were one of the best performing companies in our sector, traded at one of the highest multiples, were highly regarded. We had like 10 billion in revenue, $1 billion in after-tax profit. So very successful, except that 40% of the company was owned by the founding family, the Haas family, and it was into the 3rd and 4th generation. And they were very philanthropically oriented. They still are. And their sense was that were too much of their ownership of the foundation was based in one company. And none of the descendants were involved in the company except 2 of them on the board. And they just felt, based on the advice they got from the advisor, they need to diversify their portfolio. And the only way to diversify it was to monetize their ownership. One other condition they put was not only they want to monetize, they want to get the maximum possible value. And so I was instructed so that was a request that came from the family, but they were only 40% owner. So we decided that board is going to take responsibility and we'll keep the family member out of the discussion in this process. And of course, the world was going through a very difficult phase in 2008 economically. So it didn't seem like the right time. But I think there was enough interest in this company because of its reputation, profitability, and everything else, that literally over a period of 2 days in a lawyer's office in New York, we were able to get 75% premium on our trading price. But we did put 2 conditions. Number one, it could be all cash. And number 2, there'll be no closing conditions. Concern around what the situation in the world was unfolding, that they could back out. No, they couldn't back out, and then it'll be all cash transaction. And thank God we did that, because we took 6 months of work at the board level and advisors to really come to that conclusion. I'm glad we did, because otherwise the deal would have fallen apart in spring of 2009.
And after that point, mission accomplished, or what kept you going? Because obviously, after such a huge success, what has kept you active for all these years later?
So, I was already on a couple of company boards like Vanguard, Funds Board. I was on Unisys board. So I enjoyed that. And when I came out, I wasn't ready to just call it a day. And I think I said, let me try something completely different. And so I moved into private equity. And I joined a company called New Mountain Capital, which is now manages about 60 billion, is an amazing private equity firm. And the philosophy aligned with mine. Their philosophy was defensive businesses and growth orientation, as opposed to just restructuring, stripping, and borrowing and flipping, which is so their approach lined up with mine. And I thought I'll do this for 3-4 years. And now 16 years later, I'm still serving as senior advisor. I serve on 2 or 3 of the company boards. So it has been a great learning experience for me, being associated with them. Alongside, I joined, as I said, Hewlett-Packard board, Arconic board, Tyco board, a number of other public companies and private companies boards over time, because I just enjoyed interaction across broad sectors and global companies.
So capitalism gets a bad rap sometimes, but obviously it's made you incredibly successful, and you've had a touch on different companies. So what are people missing when you critique the way private equity works, when there's critiques about publicly traded companies and how the larger part of our economy works?
Great question, because I think part of it is because the sense is that they're only in this for money, and just for delivering results for the shareholders, which I think is very important. But one of the things I learned at Rohm and Haas, having worked there for 39 years, that is a measure of what you do. Long-term value creation is only possible if you really take care of your stakeholders. And those are your employees, those are your customers, these are the communities where you operate. And all of those things are so important. If you keep them happy and satisfied, and you have a purpose into what you're trying to do as a company, you will create long-term value. And if you look around the world, I mean, the number of companies that have very fundamental values, which are highly principled and always doing the right thing. The code of conduct it's not about just creating. Money will come, growth will happen, all of that will happen, but you have to fundamentally do it the right way, and you have to produce the right product and have the right culture in the company. And I've seen this time and again as to really taking that approach is more productive and more rewarding than it is to generate short-term profit or short-term money.
And what it's been like for you to be, in a sense, kind of assisting other entrepreneurs as a board member rather than actively running a company of that nature?
So I would say I enjoyed being a CEO and working in two companies for over a 40-year period. But I think one of the things I enjoyed the most is mentoring. And that is recognizing the talent, giving them opportunities, making bets on them. I'm going to give you a very simple statistics of this, because at the end of the day, that's the only thing that proves anything. We were a modest-sized company. We were not a huge company. And out of the top 35 people, 27 of them became CEOs around the world. And one of the most diverse group of CEOs you would think. 3 or 4 of them are women, a couple of Latin Americans, a couple of Europeans, and of course, a number of Americans. So I mean, this was something to me, was a great example. And we did not lose talent at that level. One person I lost in 10 years as a CEO who I didn't want to lose. So it was a company that kept its talent. And once the company got sold, a number of them decided to move on and have done exceptionally well.
But being on a board is a little bit different than running a company actively. So what have you seen in this experience that in terms of how to operate a company today?
So I think, I'm a big believer in good governance. And good governance starts with a very qualified, competent board, not just the friends of the CEO. But the boards can only be successful if the CEO is willing to listen to them, and the board is willing to challenge the management. If the board's only thing if they do is just to tick off what the CEO wants to do and say yea or nay, it doesn't work. And what I've done, try to do in the board I've been at, is to be very candid about my participation and where I can add value and not hesitate. And the same thing as the chair of the board is to make sure that there is a good alignment between the CEO and the board chair and the board, that we are really partnering in this process as opposed to just approving and the oversight and compliance. I mean, my belief today is boards really generate value if they focus on talent, they focus on strategy, they understand the risk, and they make sure the execution is done well. That's where the biggest value of the board is, as opposed to just oversight and compliance.
Now, a lot of us, obviously Indian American entrepreneurs have done extraordinarily well, but many of us aren't running publicly traded companies. Perhaps a lot of us have aspirations to get to where you have been, to be on boards. What kind of advice do you have for folks that are running an existing concern to try to get the company to go public, or to operate it without outside capital like that, and to become a member of a publicly traded board?
Well, just an aside, I would say the role of running a public company has become incredibly complicated. It has become complicated because of globalization. It's complicated because of rapid change in technology. It's become complicated in terms of compliance and legal cost and the media and other things, and the mix of the shareholders. They have index funds, they have active funds, they have hedge funds, they have employees, and try to satisfy all of them at the same time. So I tell this to public company CEOs, I don't envy your jobs anymore. But having said it, it is a wonderful opportunity to have a meaningful impact and a visible impact. And my take on this one is that the few things that really differentiate successful CEOs versus the one also ran. One is a diverse experience, not just one function or one business. It's people who have had multiple dimensions of experiences. So that's one. The second one is a real ability to not only do the job that they have on hand well, but to think about how the organization can get better. Because you have to demonstrate, if you have potential upwards, to say you see more opportunities for this organization to go forward than just what's the job you're doing. And the third thing I would say is it's not about you. It is about the organization. And that's an important distinction, that if you go every year to your boss and say, when is my next promotion? When is my next salary increase? You're not likely to rise to the top of the organization. But if you go and say, hey, boss, I think I see this thing we could do better, or this is the business we could invest more, or this is the person who has the high potential I think we should promote. If you show that kind of attitude, I think you think organizationally and better good of the organization, you have really better chance of moving up and becoming a leader.
Now, there's a lot of people who aspire to build a business, but they have a hard time raising capital. I know certainly when you were coming out of school, I'm sure people were not running after you trying to throw checks at you. And then I live in Silicon Valley, so I hear of stories of the whiz kid 20-year-old who are getting venture capitalists chasing them with checks if they have a certain skill set. And certainly AI is the big buzzword today as we speak, and who knows what the next technology will be. I mean, tell me about this evolution about capital markets and what bets people are making, when they're looking at a youngster who has perhaps no governing experience, but they have an idea, a concept, and a drive to build something new.
So I would say there's a big difference in the chain of what I call venture capital investment to startup experience investment, private equity investment, public company investment. There is a whole range of options. And what you find in this curve is the risk reward is very different. So when you're talking about a college graduate, or even not a college graduate, coming up with a brilliant idea, and they go make a pitch to a venture capital firm, I think that two things have happened. One is obviously the venture capital funds have seen many of these young. So that idea, a unique idea, has to connect that this is really unique. The second thing, of course, is when they are investing, as Mark Andreessen, whom I got to know well, he says it's a little bit of a spray and pray, because you spread over 30, 40 projects, and maybe one of them will be a big success, but it pays for other 29. And so it's a very different decision making when you're in venture capital. It's very different decision making when you have private equity, and it's a very different decision making process in a public company. And obviously there are pluses and minuses. I think and of course the size of investments are very different as well, and the risks are very different. So I don't think there is one pattern, and that's why you see some of the smart scientists, they do well, start up a company, and then the company reaches a certain size, they don't have the right qualities to run a big global corporation.
What have you learned from people like Mark Andreessen and other fellow board members that you work with, Meg Whitman, among others?
I would say, I think especially in this day and age with the changing world, the CEOs have to be much more outside in oriented rather than inside out. And that's particularly important if the company has been successful. Because, when the company is successful, they think doing more of the same is going to make them more successful. The reality is the outside world is changing so fast, and there's so many factors at work that until you look at yourself from outside in and get a lot of advice, a lot of independent thinking, engaging and discussing and looking at options, I think the leaders who really are not just become overconfident about what they're doing is the right way to do it. But the ones who are open-minded are better leaders than anybody. And I think you see that. A great example, of course, is Microsoft. For 10 years after Bill Gates left, that company just traded at $30 a share, didn't go anywhere. And then Satya Nadella came in and completely changed the orientation of the company and increased the valuation by tenfold over 10 years. So I think that's really what's important is getting that outside-in point of view. And the second one is the biggest differentiator is not the capital, because you can raise capital if you're the reputation and track record. It's ability to recognize talent. Talent to me is the biggest differentiator between successful CEOs and also ran CEOs. Understanding the risk, being bold, and really recognition of talent.
Before we sat down, you mentioned there were some mentors that helped you in your journey. What kind of assistance did they give you, and what kind of advice do you have for folks who are looking to follow your path?
Well, the mentorship doesn't happen just because a woman is looking for a mentor. Companies can't assign another woman necessarily as a mentor. But if I was an Indian executive, I don't need an Indian as a mentor. I think that notion doesn't work. So mentorship should happen almost naturally. And I think it can happen within your organization, and frankly, it can happen outside your organization. And for example, I think, to me, the best mentors are the ones who see the talent in you and the potential, but are not afraid to tell you what you need to focus on in order to become more effective. And I was very fortunate during my career to at least have 3 or 4 mentors who saw in me more than I saw in myself, were not afraid to give me opportunities to prove myself, and also willing to point out that there are things I should do differently than I'm doing, or the way I'm communicating. So I think that those are the mentors who really make a difference, who saw the potential, who see the potential, but at the same time see where you need to fine-tune yourself.
Speaking of mentors, you and your wife have mentored 2 amazing daughters who have done big things in their own careers. Speak about them briefly. I know fathers gush about their children in particular, but I mean, we know them from covering the diaspora. Certainly, one of your daughters, Vinitha, is Vinitha Gupta, very, very well known in the DC community. So talk about their success and their rise and some of the experiences that they've had to set them on this path.
Well, I don't know if I. First of all, we are very fortunate, really, honestly. I think there are two, three contributing factors to this success. One, I would say, the values that I inherited from my parents about hard work, honesty, and humility. The same things that my wife had from her family. So I think they were very compatible goals, although she always, from the time she was born, time she married, she lived in the same house in the same city, didn't speak a word of English when she came to the United States, but had incredible intuition about this. And the other thing I would say is being bold. As I mentioned, we lived in Europe for 15 years, Asia for 5 years. And the girls were like 4 years and 9 years old when we first moved to England. And one of the things, looking back, obviously my wife had a huge contribution in raising these two daughters, Amita and Vanita, partly because I was out a lot, and partly because, they were self-motivated to do well. We didn't tell them. I frankly don't remember looking at the grade cards ever in my life. And so they were self-motivated, but we also encouraged them to be more diversified instead of just focus on studies. So they were both very athletic, engaged in a lot of extracurricular activities as well. And the final thing, I would say is my advice to them always was not to tell them what to do or which school they should go to or which topic or career they should build on, is to say, pursue your passion. And if you pursue your passion, you will do just fine, you will enjoy it. So I think as it turned out, Amita, when I first suggested to her, she was good in science and math, go study engineering, work, and do MBA like I did. She was smart enough to get accepted at MIT, and then after one semester, she said, this is not my calling, but I'll finish it. And after that, she took a year off and decided she wants to be in medicine. And when she was in medicine, she decided she wants to be in public health and help people. And that's really what led to her career. In case of Juanita, liberal arts, it's languages, other things. But, she was protesting with the day of graduation at Yale. She was out there protesting on behalf of the workers of Yale, but fair wages. So she was very much in a different track, went to law school, then ACLU and Legal Defense Fund and government, two positions, one with President Obama as head of the Civil Rights Division and as number 3 in Justice Department as Associate Attorney General. So I don't know other than sharing when they're watching our values and how we raise them and having the freedom to pursue their passion. I think that's probably the biggest thing I can say about what led to the success of these two young ladies.
And this has led to significant philanthropy. You've done a lot of philanthropy. A lot of it's kind of gone under the radar. You're not a very flashy person. Even your donation here to Johns Hopkins didn't really pop on my screen until fairly recently. And of course, now you're involved in getting this India Institute started. So give us some context about your philanthropic work, what you're doing in the U.S. and India, and then, of course, this institute, which had their first conference here in Washington, D.C., which, by the way, congratulations. I thought it was very well done for a student conference, 2 days. And it's very challenging to get people's attention, but you certainly have done that. So tell me about your motivations philanthropically, what you're doing domestically and globally.
So, I was very fortunate to work with a company, as I said, was 40% of us family owned, and majority of that was owned by a foundation. And at one time, and they probably still are, one of the highest, the biggest charitable foundation in Philadelphia area. So, I saw them, how they managed their wealth and how they contributed to the charities. And when as I say, fortunate enough, when the company got sold, that there was a significant reward for me personally. And I had always in mind about giving back, and giving back not only to the country, which really I made a career in and lived here and became citizen in the United States, but also some obligation to say there are things I can do in India. And the other thing which I would say are two differentiating factors for both me and my wife were education and healthcare. Are the two platforms we thought are the most distinguishing thing that make people successful. And so I think those were the two fundamental things. And then after I retired in 2009, in December of that year, we created this organization, Ujala. And by the way, the initial funding half of it came from the Haas family, the other half came from us. This was their way of thanking me for generating a huge amount of value for their foundation and family. So it was just the generous way of contributing to our foundation as well. And of course, it has grown over time, and we started off with some modest things like setting up fellowships at Cornell, Drexel, and basically local area Museum of Philadelphia, Franklin Institute, and other things. That was a start. But as it went on, I think in India, our focus really became through Johns Hopkins for two reasons. One was I always believed, I want to invest in causes I believe and people I trust. And of course, Amita joined Johns Hopkins in 2003 as an assistant professor in infectious diseases. And she started working in India from literally from day one. And we had a chance to see the work on the ground they were doing in India. And I also got to meet many of her colleagues. And it seemed to us, this was something that is a great way for us to contribute to India. It's an organization we know, people we know, and it's very much aligned to our efforts. And that's really what led to 5 years ago, the launch of the Gupta Kalinsky Institute. In the US, our two biggest initiatives have been the Governance Institute at Drexel's LeBow School of Business. I'm a big believer in good governance, and the professorship in infectious diseases at Johns Hopkins that John Bollinger occupies. So I think it has been very focused, few causes, few organizations, both having impact in India and in the United States.
And Hopkins has had a presence in India for some time now, but this really establishes even a deeper link.
Correct. Because Hopkins has been operating in India for over 100 years. Over time, I think there have been 160 faculty members who have basically raised money through different sources and have invested almost $300+ million in India over time. And I think when we looked at the opportunity for Johns Hopkins, we said, how do we build the brand of Johns Hopkins in India and recognition? Because to be successful in India, you need partnership with the government, recognition of the brand names, and all of that. The second thing was that as healthcare and public health became more and more important causes in India, is we felt that is an area where Hopkins can provide a lot of original ideas, but also relevant to needs in India. And if we can successfully demonstrate those successes, it has applications beyond India. So I think that was another driver. And then, of course, more recently, with the emergence of AI, I think that has the potential of really making healthcare and public health accessible to the masses and affordable as well. So I think that this has evolved, it's become more cross-functional. So we are basically saying is a united front, presenting a united front of Hopkins in India and leveraging that globally.
And will there be a specific focus of this institute? It will be public policy? Will it be on health?
I would say, I think there are three priorities that we have set for ourselves right now. One is elimination of TB in schools and generally communicable diseases over time. And they have demonstrated in Dharamsala 87% reduction in school over 2-3 years. And we are launching a big study in about 4 more states. The second one is STEM program, and this includes science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. Is how do we elevate women in business, academia, research in India through collaboration, fellowships and exchange programs and things like that. And the third one is now that AI is really coming into its own, and it's very, what I say, cross-functional and cross-discipline approach. If we are going to be successful, is not just having the data analytics, having the health information, expertise in healthcare and public health. So this is really taking this to another level now, to say if we can take the new technology evolution and the fact that Hopkins has just received $2 billion for launching the AI Institute at Hopkins, they will have the faculty and the know-how to really take this to another level. So those are the three priorities that we have broadly set for ourselves.
At this time that we're speaking, things have changed a little bit academically here. There's some challenges on universities in the United States, and certainly India has cracked down on foreign funding. So how do you navigate that, especially at a time that's difficult in both these countries?
Yeah. Well, good question, because I don't think we anticipated things to unfold the way they have. On the other hand, the fundamental needs and capabilities are still there. And I think that's really the principle that we are operating on, is that Hopkins has a commitment to India. They have really real clear ideas about what they can bring to the table, and building partnership with India and making a case with our potential partners as well as the government and agencies is still the right track to be on. Maybe it'll take a little longer than we thought to get where we want to be, but I'm a believer that the need is there, expertise is there, willingness is there, and I think if we just stay focused and have the right team and have the patience, I think we will do very well.
Well, I really appreciate your time and hearing about all of these endeavors. And I think for those of us that have long looked up to this first generation, this generation that set the table for those of us that came after, that wanted to do good works, and fortunate enough to pursue what we dreamed to do. And your kids are that example. I've been very fortunate to be able to pursue what I wanted to do. And so thank you for the work you did, because without that foundation, where would this community be? And now look where the community is, growing so rapidly, even having presidential contenders and people that are running companies, I mean, left and right. It's really amazing.
It is quite amazing. I think when I came here, it was doctors, engineers, scientists, individual performers. And now, of course, we are in every domain, from television like you are, and to the government everywhere. And, we are everywhere, which is wonderful.
And tell people about the book, $8 and a Dream, because I do have a copy. Amazing stories that was captured in that one.
So the reason for writing that book goes back to my two daughters. So they both married late in life and had young boys, three grandsons. And about 10 years ago, they came to me and said, "Dad, we know our life, we know your family, but I don't know what states you will be to share this with these young kids. And why don't you write a family history?" So that's how that project started. And as I got into it with my co-author, two things occurred to me. One is, rather than just me telling story from my vantage point, doesn't make any sense. So I had my wife, my two daughters, my ex-colleagues, my bosses really contribute to this book. Their perspective and how they saw me change, evolve, and grow, and how I impacted them in different ways. So it's really a collective 360-degree profile and feedback. I think that was one of them, an important thing. The other one I would say is, and the book, we have sold more than 50,000 copies without any advertising. And I think if you look at the reviews on Amazon, it'll say what is unique about this book is it's very honest. It is not bragging about anything. It is more about, it's educational, it's honest, it's something that they can relate to. But the origins of it goes back to request from my daughters to write a family history.
Amazing. Great book for everyone to pick up. Author, philanthropist, entrepreneur, Raj Gupta, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.